What is going on, everyone? It is Josh Guerrero here, and welcome to the All Around Adventure Podcast. If you're joining me for the first time, I'm really glad that you're here, and if you are a return listener, I'm also very glad you're here, and I want to welcome you either way. That wasn't the best intro, but hey, we're going to go with it. And if you are, in fact, new to the show, you're not entirely sure what we're all about here, like was mentioned in my fancy new intro, I'm still very much digging that intro. This is a show where you hear amazing tales from afar and get the all-important life lessons that go along with them. And those will be stories from some of the fantastic guests that I welcome on this podcast. I have elite warriors joining me on the show from time to time. I also have entrepreneurs, digital nomads, best-selling authors, bloggers, adventurers, philanthropists, you name it. If they have a fantastic travel story to tell and some great life lessons to share, it's my job to seek them out, bring them on this podcast, and extract their stories and life lessons through powerful conversations to help you level up in your life. Though every now and then, I like to throw out a solo show. I call it Travel Reflections, which is exactly how it sounds. I share some of my own travel experiences with you all and share some stories from, my adventures around the world and times that I've lived abroad, and try to extrapolate some of my own life lessons to share with you all in hopes that it will benefit you in some way. And today's episode, as you saw in the title, is just simply gratitude practice. And this is something that I've implemented in my life from my time living in West Africa. I was in the Gambia, which is a really small country. It's the smallest country on the entire African continent. It's located in West Africa. It's completely engulfed by Senegal. And I was there for 2 years as a Peace Corps volunteer, and I was a primary teacher trainer working at a school in a small village. But during that experience is when this idea of gratitude and practicing gratitude kind of started to become a more regular thing for me, especially when I moved back to the United States following that experience. And then I'm going to get to that in a second. But I've just noticed that my life moving forward and my mindset and kind of just how I show up in the world has been impacted for the better because I started implementing gratitude practice, more regularly into my life. And I've noticed this most especially when it comes to how I just become more grateful for just the basics. If you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the basics that that are the most vital to us in order to effectively stay alive and survive is needs like shelter, food, water, everything that's going to support us biologically so that way we can actually stay alive. And then, of course, you get into other needs like love, companionship, and things along those lines. But I kind of want to talk about the basics a little bit first, because there is a very, very huge distinct difference between the access that I had to things to fulfill my basic needs while I was living in the Gambia compared to the access that I had to things to fulfill my basic needs here in the U.S. Now, when I was living in the Gambia, I did have shelter. I lived in a square hut. It wasn't very big. It was probably the size of my bedroom that I'm currently at in my townhome that I live in right now. And then I did have access to water, but not quite as freely as I've had before. There were communal taps in the village that I'd lived in, and they were powered by solar panels, which I thought was kind of intriguing, especially for this remote village way out in the middle of this West African country. But they were powering the tabs that were scattered throughout the village, but they would only come on for a couple hours a day. And so during that short window, I had to take buckets and pails. I had to fill them up, and then I had to bring them back to my square hut, and I had to take it through its paces, and I had to allocate the water and ration it for the various things that I needed it for. I'll say, okay, so I'll have this bucket is going to be drinking water. That bucket's going to be used to wash clothes. That bucket over there is going to be used to bathe with, and things like that. And with the water that I had set aside to drink, I couldn't just drink it directly as it was. I had to put it through a little bit of a process first, Peace Corps had issued filters to all the volunteers, so I would run the water through a filter. And even then, that was only getting out some of the larger organisms and microbes and heavy metals and things like that. But it wasn't really quite enough to filter out potential waterborne parasites and other things. So I had to put like a drop or two of bleach. And yes, you heard that correctly. I actually had to put bleach, the same thing you use to put in your laundry machine. I had to put a couple drops of that in there to kill off any of those other things. And I remember there was one time when I didn't do that and I got infected with Giardia really bad. And I'm not going to go into details on the effects of Giardia. If you feel so inclined to learn about Giardia and what happens to someone who gets it, I'll leave you to do your own research. But, I'm going to kind of omit that part of this story out here because it's pretty nasty and disgusting. So I was able to fulfill my basic need for water most of the time. I still had to go through a little bit of a process, but there was one time in particular where I wasn't able to get water for quite a while. Something went haywire with the solar panel system that was powering the taps in the village, and these pumps in the village did not come on for 3 whole days. So for 3 days, I had to completely change how I use water, and I had to ration water much more strictly. I couldn't just, I wasn't able to bathe. I wasn't able to wash dishes or clothes or anything like that. All the water that I had was immediately shifted to just be used for drinking water and for filtering water. Because I had no idea when these taps were going to come back on. And I just remembered by the 3rd day of not being able to collect water, mentally, I was struggling because, I was starting to get a little bit dehydrated. It was also really hot out. It was like 107 degrees on most days there in the Gambia. And I tell you what, everyone, very few things in this world fuck with your head more than possibly not being able to fulfill a basic need. And in this case, drinking water. Because the rules of threes go, which the rules of threes, it's a survival term that many wilderness survival experts and people will say, is you can go like 3 minutes without air, 3 days without water, and 3 weeks without food. There's a few other ones in there, but in just this case, I'll just kind of talk on those 3. So 3 days without water, it's game over. That's it. You're done for. And so here I was already 3 days not being able to collect more water, and I was kind of running out. And I just remembered how irritable and frustrated and everything else in between came there. But then I kind of had something that I kept in check to keep myself in check. And that was, if I can't collect water, the other villagers and my host family, they can't collect water either. And the majority of my family members that made up my host family were young children. And they, seeing them, seemed to be handling the situation a hell of a lot better than I was. And so that's what sort of brought me down a couple of notches, if you will, and to kind of sort of shift my mindset to where I wasn't thinking so negatively and still recognizing that this was a shitty situation to be in, but I was able to handle it a little bit better, just sort of kind of thinking about that. And eventually, of course, the taps did come back on. I was able to collect water and I was able to make it through that experience. And of course, I survived, and of course, I'm recording this right now for sure. But either way, just getting water there was a process nonetheless. Just having to collect it each day, doing it within that same 2-hour window, bringing it back, allocating it, running it through the filter before I could drink it. It definitely took a little bit of getting used to and a little bit of adjusting, but I was pretty grateful that I had water nonetheless, though. Similar thing with food, too. It's I didn't have refrigeration or anything like that to where I could just go and eat whenever I want. I pretty much had to wait for my host family to finish making meals, didn't have the greatest variety. It was usually a rice bowl with a few other things. And it took a while to make because my host mothers, they would actually boil the rice and cook the food over open fires, no electrical stoves or ovens or anything like that, just an open fire to make virtually everything that we ate. And again, I was just thrilled that I had the food nonetheless. I'm a bit of an anime buff, and there's a little bit of a side story. There's this anime that I liked to watch growing up called Cowboy Bebop. And the main character, Spike Spiegel, he made this comment because just sort of a synopsis of the show. Spike Spiegel, the main character, he's part of a crew of bounty hunters, and they're having a hard time finding work, and they're running low on money, so they're just buying like simple things to eat, like cups of noodles and ramen and like instant ramen and a few other things. And then he made this point saying that hunger is the best spice. And so I just remember, and that was certainly the case when I was in Gambia. It may not have been the most tasty or the most flavorful food that I've ever eaten, but it just tasted so good when I was hungry because, again, hunger is the best spice. And so certainly challenging to fulfill and tough to fulfill my basic needs. But looking on that experience, it made me all the more grateful by the time I moved back to the United States. Because again, here in the US, as I mentioned right now, my bedroom that I'm recording in right now is about the size of the entire square hut that I had for 2 years living in West Africa. And this is just a small section of the townhome that I currently live in. And now to get water, easy. I go to my tap, my sink, and I just crank the little handle, and then I have a seemingly endless supply of clean drinking water that I don't have to filter, and that I don't have any really worries that it's going to infect me with some parasites that are just going to wreck me. And it's the same thing with food too. I can go to the grocery store, just have an unbelievable variety of choices that I could purchase from and bring home. I have refrigeration that I could keep my food to last a lot longer, and things along those lines too. So I have quick and easy and efficient access to everything that I need here in the U.S. to fulfill my basic needs, and I'm so grateful for that. And it really puts things in perspective for me because I've seen firsthand how so many other people around the world don't have the same access to these resources to fulfill basic needs like I do. And that includes like my host family back home. And how this helps with my mindset and helps with how I show up in the world is I keep myself in check whenever I find myself complaining about seemingly trivial things. I use this to sort of catch myself, every now and then, let's say if I'm standing in a long line at the grocery store, or I'm ordering food at a restaurant and I feel like it's taking too long. I just sort of think to myself, you know what, Josh, you have nothing to complain about right now. Your host family back in Gambia, they're cooking their meals over an actual fire. And it's taken a very, very long time, and they got a lot of mouths to feed. What are you getting so upset about? And so that's one thing that really kind of keeps me in check. And that's one thing I've always been grateful for the experiences that I've had with not only living in places like the Gambia, but in other places that I've seen around the world. Because I saw firsthand what living conditions and what the access to resources are like for other people. Hell, in some places, like the water that they have access to is filthy and dirty. Like the water in my toilet bowl right now is cleaner. So that's why I take, that's why I've implemented gratitude practice as much as I have, because I know that, challenges are inevitably going to arise. That's just simple living. Challenges will always be faced. There's always going to be something that's going to be frustrating, irritable, annoying, challenging, fill in the blank. But I think just knowing that I got something, let's say the basics covered, is well, let me know. Okay, well, if I'm able to meet my basic needs, like I ate today, I drank water today, I got a roof over my head, I'm breathing clean air, then I'm good. Bring on the challenges. I've already met these basic needs, and I could handle these just fine too. So what does gratitude practice actually look like from a practical a practical sense? Well, I know some people that I know, some very successful and good-minded people. And when I say good-minded, they're just positive thinkers and things like that. They will do like a journal. They'll journal in the morning, maybe jot like 3 to 5 things that they're grateful for. And then there's also ways where you can take tough situations or maybe even like frustrating or annoying situations, and you can turn it into a gratitude practice moment. Here's a couple of examples. Let's say you get upset because your kids made a mess with their food. Like they dropped crumbs on the floor or something like that, or they spilt their drink, or whatever it might be. At least with that, that your children ate that day, or they had something to drink that day, so to speak, even though a lot of it ended up in the floor in this example. But that your kids have their basic needs covered, and so that's something that you can certainly be grateful for. Or if something goes wrong with your car and you needed to drop a couple $100 to get it fixed, at least you have a car. At least you actually have a problem with your car that you get to fix, and you'll get it back. So there's a lot of ways you can turn like even those tough situations into something to be grateful for. And then it also doesn't have to be too formal to practice gratitude. The one thing that I like to do is I'll have a Post-it note on my mirror in my bathroom that just simply says gratitude. And that's a prompt for me to think about things that I'm grateful for while I'm brushing my teeth, which, I should have mentioned, I put this sticky note on the mirror right next to my toothbrush. So while I'm brushing my teeth, I can actually think about things that I'm grateful for. And now, the things I'm grateful for, they vary depending on times. And of course, I'm grateful for, things like having an amazing family. I got a beautiful and amazing girlfriend. But a lot of times it's just, I always turn back and reflect on the basics. I woke up this morning and I looked up at a ceiling above me, reminding me that I have shelter and that I'm protected from the elements, which is good because it's raining outside right now. I also grabbed my water bottle that I keep on my nightstand, and I drank I drank from it. So I have access to water. And then if I'm thirsty later, go right downstairs and fill it back up again. I also have a fully stocked fridge and a fully stocked pantry full of all kinds of healthy and nutritious foods to keep my body strong and healthy. So that's where I usually start with when it comes to gratitude practice, is just being grateful for the basics. And it's something that I, set up each morning and I meet those basic needs right away, so I know I could tackle the day and tackle anything that I may face throughout my life. And so that's really all I have to say on that subject for today. I hope you all enjoyed the stories that I've mentioned today. I hope you found these lessons beneficial. Think about where you can implement gratitude into your life and reflect on the things that you're grateful for. And one last thing that I will say to keep in mind, that it's okay to be frustrated with problems. We're human beings. That's just a natural thing to be feel frustration and annoyance and things along those lines too. But I can guarantee you that the problems that you face, there's someone on the somewhere else in the world that's experiencing far greater problems than you are, that would happy to switch places with you. And that your nightmares, put that in quotations, that you have is someone else's dream. And with that, everyone, thank you very much for tuning in today. If you did find this episode valuable, be sure to leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. That'll get us trending higher so that way more people can find this episode and this podcast. Also, feel free to share this episode with a friend or family member who you think will also enjoy it. And do subscribe to the podcast. New episodes come out every single Monday. And on this coming Monday, I have another episode featuring another fantastic guest. So be sure to check back in. Also have a private Facebook group called Travel Titans. If you are interested in checking out the group, head over to facebook.com/groups/Travel Titans. Really appreciate you all tuning in. I know you got a lot going on and that you're busy, but it just means the world to me that you chose to download and listen to this podcast to hear what I had to say today. And with that, I'll see you all next Monday. And until then, I'm Josh Guerrero saying be safe, happy travels, and always move forward.